Hello and welcome to another incredibly boring video. Today I wanted to talk about my life. I'm vlogging my life. Every week I talk about more of my life. I wanted to talk about the age from around 10 to around 15. So it's all about change and mental illness. First of all, I want to say that I'm not trying to blame anyone in this video. This video is really tough for my benefit. If you're watching it, awesome. I don't really care that much. It's really about me. It's all about me. I'm not trying to blame anyone. The people that would be upset probably aren't going to see this video anyway because, well, most of them don't have internet anymore. So you'll see what I'm talking about after you watch this. So when I was 11 years old, when I was 10 years old, we moved. We moved from the big city, Surrey, to a little country town, not even in the town of Salmonarm. We lived like 20 kilometers out of the town into nowhere, right? We bought 3/4 of an acre or something, and my dad tries to start a little hobby farm. Big change for not just me, but for everyone in my family. So, for example, now remember how I said before that when you grow up, even weird things just seem natural? Well, that kind of falls apart when you start getting to a certain age. And about between the age of 10 and 15 is when I started realizing that maybe my life isn't normal. For example, my mother became very depressed. She had a baby right after we moved, and she didn't really leave her room for a long time. How long? I don't know. It could have been 6 months. It could have been 2 years. It could have been only a few months. I remember it being a really long time. My mother didn't leave her room. She left her room to go to the bathroom, and that was it. We never saw our mother. We'd come home. I didn't know whether she was home or not. I didn't want to knock on her doors because she would get upset. But my mother just kind of checked out for a while. My father, well, I don't know if he always had been strange. I think so. But he started really acting strange after we moved. For example, he stopped using his arm. He claimed, because of injuries. Sometimes he talked about it was a cliff diving an accident. Sometimes he talked about it being a car accident. I have nerve damage. I can't use my arm anymore. He literally stopped using his arm for a couple of years. He would wear a neck brace, claiming he needed it because of the nerve damage he had. He only slept on the floor. He would sleep on the floor in the living room in a sleeping bag. He claimed it was better for his back. Well, how did that start affecting me? Well, remember, as I said, we moved from the city to the country. And, you might think that country kids are a lot nicer and easier going than city kids. No. I learned all sorts of new words within a couple weeks of moving to the country. I was called gay and fag so often, I started to wonder if I was. Learning words that I'm not even going to mention on here because they'll get this demonetized. Even though I'm not making any money, I'm not going to even talk about some of those words. But, I was the type of kid that as a teacher now, I would have phoned protective custody on. I never bathed. Maybe once a week I'd have a bath. I wore dirty, ripped clothes every day. I began to realize I didn't really have any friends. I thought I had friends growing up, and I started to realize, well, first of all, they were my brother's friends, they weren't mine, and we left them all behind in Vancouver, Surrey. I didn't have any friends. I tried making friends, and I thought I had friends, but they weren't really friends. They were just people that we knew that I hung out with. In fact, my best friend, believe it or not, started becoming Spock. As I said before in a video, I loved Star Trek and I loved Spock. And I started getting into my own personal world, always sitting for hours in my room daydreaming, not really being in connection with reality for the longest time. I started becoming obsessed with music. And everyone knows me, knows that I love music. But of course, I was a young kid at the time. I became obsessed with my parents' music. So Bobby Fuller 5 and Harry Belafonte, man, I love the song I Fought the Law. You would listen to that song on repeat on records for hours and hours and hours. Um, I started becoming OCD in some of my habits. Now, not the cleanliness, as we've already established. I didn't shower or anything. But for example, my parents used to claim, the reason we had kids is so that we wouldn't have to do housework. Was that a joke? Talking to my sister, she thinks it was a joke. I didn't take it as a joke at the time, whether it was or not. But my parents, my mother, as I said, was going through a depression. She locked herself in a room. Who did the housework? It was mostly us kids. Now, I didn't like doing housework. Don't get me wrong. I always fought. My brother and I fought about doing housework. My brother wouldn't do it. The way I remember it is that I did most of the housework growing up. Now, you know how a lot of families, at least they used to, have a good set of dishes and regular set of dishes? Well, we had a good set of dishes and a cupboard on the wall, and they were never used. Well, we never had company. My parents didn't invite people over. But all this fancy glasswork and crystal work, and I would have started obsessively washing all this crystal work and washing stuff like that. My parents got so concerned with me that they sent me to a psychologist, and his recommendation was for me to write. And I actually still remember, we talked. He says, "Oh, like, what do you like to read?" And at that point, I was really into the Hardy Boys. He said, "Oh, can you write me I've always wanted to buy the Hardy Boys. Can you write me a story like the Hardy Boys?" So I wrote him a story, and I still remember, the Hardy Boys were hiding under a table when the bad guys came in. And anyway, his recommendation was that I should write. I should write to work out my feelings, and I've done that the rest of my life. I've written stories and poetry, a lot of poetry. Why? Not so much to make art, because most of my writing isn't that good, but it's for me, right? That's why I've written so much in my lifetime, because Dr. Mars told me it was a good idea. I would lock myself in my room and obsessively write lists of people. For example, I had this whole game that I played where there'd be 20 people. Each person had had a name that started with a different letter, and I'd work out the chances. So every 5 years, they had a 50% chance of having a baby, and so I would work out all these new lists of people and how they would intermarry, and yeah, somewhat obsessive, somewhat compulsive, and kind of weird in retrospect, but I didn't have a lot of other things to do in my life. Who was going to do homework? Who was going to actually, I had to do something other than read, which I used to read a novel a day at one point, but that's not quite yet in my story. Anyway, so I became all set to begin the true gelling of personality. Late adolescence, which is what I'm going to talk about next time, because this is already almost 10 minutes long. Anyway, you have a good one. I'm glad you stuck it out to the end. Wasn't it fun? Bye now.